Happy Thanksgiving alone, old man. The text glowed on my phone, sent from Paris. They thought the old judge was finished. They were about to find out my courtroom was wherever I stood. If you're listening, subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. It helps to know I'm not alone. The smell of Thanksgiving filled my house. Turkey, sage, thyme. It was the smell of comfort. The smell of tradition. It was the smell of Elizabeth, my late wife. For 40 years, Elizabeth ran Thanksgiving. It was her masterpiece. 5 years ago, she passed away. The music stopped. The house, this big house we built near the city, felt too empty. The silence was too loud. I am Robert. I spent my life as a circuit court judge. I weighed evidence. I delivered verdicts. I valued order and the law. In my courtroom, I demanded respect. In my home, I just wanted connection. This Thanksgiving, I decided, would be perfect. I wanted to honor Elizabeth. I wanted to reconnect with the only family I had left. My daughter Chloe and her husband Mark. Things were strained between us. That's putting it mildly. Mark was an investment broker, a smooth talker with a dazzling too-white smile and an ambition that felt slick like oil. He was always working on a big deal, a massive windfall that never happened, but it always needed just a little more capital. My capital. Ever since he married Chloe 3 years ago, my daughter changed. The sweet, empathetic girl who volunteered at the animal shelter was gone. In her place was a woman obsessed with appearances. Distant, critical. The pressure from them had been building for months. It started subtly. They suggested managing this house was too much work for a man my age. Then the suggestions became demands, thinly veiled in fake concern. It all came to a head during their last visit. Chloe was sipping expensive wine. Her eyes darted around my study. Taking inventory of the antiques, the artwork, she wasn't looking at me. "Dad, you need to think about the future," she said, her voice tight. "I do think about the future, Chloe." "Constantly," I replied calmly. I adjusted the silver-framed photograph of Elizabeth on my desk. Her smile radiant. Mark chimed in. He leaned forward too eagerly. His overpowering cologne filled the room. It made my eyes water. "What Chloe means, Robert, is that managing the family trust is complex," Mark said, his voice dripping with false sincerity. "The markets are volatile, extremely tricky. You've done a stellar job, of course." He paused. I knew what was coming next. It was always the same script. "But perhaps it's time to let us take the reins," he continued. "You should be enjoying your retirement." They thought I was slipping. They saw a 72-year-old man who gardened and read old law books. They saw the slight tremor in my hand. They didn't see the judge who had dismantled complex fraud cases. They saw weakness where there was patience. They saw an easy target. "The trust is secure," I told them firmly. I used my courtroom voice. "It will transfer to Chloe upon my death, as planned. I am perfectly capable of managing my affairs." Mark's smile tightened. A flicker of frustration crossed his face. Then the mask slipped back on. "We just worry you're getting overwhelmed, old man," Mark said. He said it casually, like he was commenting on the weather. But his eyes were sharp, watching me, waiting for a reaction. "Your memory isn't what it used to be," he pressed. "Remember last week? You forgot the name of my associate at the charity gala? That phrase, 'old man.' It stung. It was intentional, meant to diminish me, to make me feel small. They were building a narrative, establishing a pattern. I knew the law. I knew exactly what they were doing. But it wasn't just the big meetings. It was the small things, too, the little cuts designed to bleed me dry. A few weeks before Thanksgiving, I was organizing Elizabeth's old photo albums. Chloe stopped by unexpectedly. She found me sitting on the floor, surrounded by memories. "Dad, what are you doing?" she asked, her tone sharp, like a teacher scolding a child. "You look confused. Did you forget where these go?" "I'm not confused, Chloe. I'm reminiscing," I said, my voice tight. "It just seems like you're losing track of things lately," she said, picking up a picture of her mother. She didn't even look at it. "Maybe we should hire someone to help you organize. Keep things straight." I just stared at her. She was documenting my decline, or rather manufacturing it. Even my neighbor noticed the change. Mrs. Petrov, an older woman who lived next door for 30 years. She was sharp, observant, and didn't trust Mark from day one. I saw her while trimming the hedges. "Judge Robert," she said, her accent thick. "Your daughter and the husband, they come often now. But they do not stay long." "They're busy, Mrs. Petrov," I replied, avoiding her gaze. Busy is good, but they look hungry, she said, her eyes narrowing. Be careful, Judge. Hungry dogs bite the hand that feeds. Her warning unsettled me. It echoed in the silence of the house. But I dismissed it. This was my daughter, my blood. This Thanksgiving was my attempt at a truce. A ceasefire in this Cold War. I wanted to believe, perhaps foolishly, that my daughter was still in there. I started preparing 3 days in advance. I brined the turkey exactly how Elizabeth used to. Citrus, peppercorns, fresh rosemary. I made the cranberry sauce from scratch. I even made the complicated oyster stuffing Mark claimed to love. I despised the texture. It was a peace offering, a desperate plea for normalcy. On Thanksgiving morning, I woke before dawn. I spent hours in the kitchen, fueled by strong coffee and a desperate, fragile hope. By 4 in the afternoon, everything was ready. The dining room table was set with our best china. Crystal glasses sparkled. The turkey was golden brown. It looked like a magazine cover. It looked like love. I sat in my favorite armchair, looking out the window. Dusk settled over the neighborhood. The air was crisp. 5 o'clock came and went. The time they promised to arrive. I wasn't worried. Traffic could be bad. They lived in a luxury condo downtown, one I owned, rent-free, a fact they conveniently forgot. 6 o'clock, the food was getting cold. I turned the oven on low. The gravy developed a thin skin. I picked up my phone and called Chloe, straight to voicemail. Chloe, sweetheart, just checking in. I said, my voice strained. Everything is ready. Hope traffic isn't too bad. Love you. I waited. The silence in the house felt heavy. The grandfather clock ticked loudly, each sound a hammer blow against the quiet. The smell of sage and thyme, once comforting, started to feel sickly sweet. Funereal? I was pacing now, trying to outrun the truth. 7 o'clock. The sun had completely set. The dining room felt shadowed, empty, a tomb. I called again. Voicemail. I called Mark. Voicemail? My heart pounded. A dull, aching realization settled in. They weren't late. They weren't stuck. They weren't coming. I walked into the dining room, looked at the table, all that work, all that hope. I felt a profound sadness, an emptiness that echoed the empty chairs. I thought about the years I sacrificed, the long hours in the courtroom, the stress, all of it was for her. Then my phone buzzed. A text message from Chloe. I opened it. My fingers trembled, expecting an apology, an excuse, a flat tire, anything. It was a picture. Chloe and Mark, bundled in expensive new winter coats, raising champagne glasses, smiling widely, smug, triumphant. Behind them, sparkling in the night, was the Eiffel Tower. They were in Paris. Below the picture was the caption, "Old man, we flew to Europe to get away from you. Your suffocating traditions are exhausting. Happy Thanksgiving alone." I read the message once, twice, 3 times. I stood there, the phone heavy in my hand, the bright screen illuminating my face in the dark dining room. Suffocating traditions. Old man, get away from you, alone. I looked at the perfectly set table. I looked back at the smiling faces in the photo. They hadn't just forgotten. They had planned this. They had chosen cruelty. They flew across the ocean, undoubtedly using the generous monthly allowance I provided, to escape the father who gave them everything. They were mocking me. A wave of nausea washed over me. The heartbreak was physical. A sharp pain in my chest. I thought I might collapse under the weight of their contempt. My ears rang. For a second, I forgot how to breathe. But then, a strange thing happened. The sadness began to recede. The anger I expected didn't come. Instead, I felt a cold, sharp clarity wash over me. The kind of clarity I used to feel right before delivering a final judgment. A moment when all the noise, all the emotions faded away, leaving only the truth. The truth was simple, and it was ugly. They had mistaken my silence for acceptance, my generosity for foolishness, my grief for weakness. They forgot who I was. I wasn't upset. I was resolute. I walked over to the table, picked up a dinner roll, took a bite. It was good. Elizabeth would have been proud. I poured myself a glass of wine, a rich Cabernet. I ate my Thanksgiving dinner alone, standing at the head of the table, in complete silence, savoring every bite. It was a meal prepared with love. I would honor that, even if they wouldn't. After I finished eating, I cleared my plate. I wrapped up the turkey, carefully placing the leftovers into containers. I didn't waste anything. I would take the food to the local shelter tomorrow. Someone should be grateful. Then I went into my study, the room lined with law books, the scent of old paper and leather. This was my domain. This was where I understood the rules. I sat at my desk, opened the bottom drawer, pulled out a secure, encrypted phone I kept for emergencies. I made one phone call. The war had begun. The next morning, I woke up feeling refreshed. I hadn't slept that well in years. The weight of expectation had been lifted. I felt a strange sense of freedom. I made coffee and toast, went out to tend to my rose bushes. Elizabeth had loved these roses. The crisp November air felt good on my face. Around 10 o'clock, my doorbell rang. It was David, my oldest friend, my personal lawyer. David had been my partner at the law firm before I was appointed to the bench. He managed my finances, the family trust. He was the one person I trusted implicitly. He was the one I had called last night. David looked worried. He rushed into the foyer, his coat half open. He was a kind man, always anxious. "Robert, I got your message on the secure line," David said, his voice hushed. "You said to initiate protocol, Elizabeth. Are you absolutely sure? That's the nuclear option, Robert. It's scorched earth." I ushered him into the study, closed the heavy oak door. I poured us both a cup of coffee. "They didn't show up for Thanksgiving, David," I said simply. David sighed, ran a hand through his graying hair. He sank into one of the leather chairs. "They're thoughtless, Robert. Incredibly selfish. I know that, but protocol, Elizabeth, it's extreme." I held up my hand, stopping him. "They didn't just miss dinner." I showed him the picture, the text. "They flew to Paris. They called me an old man whose traditions were suffocating. They did it deliberately, cruelly." David stared at the screen. Speechless, the color drained from his face. He understood the depth of the betrayal. "They declared war, David," I said calmly, my voice steady, the voice of a judge presiding over his court. "I am merely responding in kind. They have underestimated me for the last time." Protocol Elizabeth was a contingency plan, named after my wife because she always believed in preparing for the worst. Designed to protect the family assets in case of extreme circumstances. Like profound betrayal from within. "I want everything frozen," I instructed. "Effective immediately." David nodded, his worry replaced by a grim determination. He pulled out his laptop, began typing furiously. "All credit cards linked to the trust. Cancelled," David reported. "The joint bank accounts are frozen. The lines of credit are closed. They won't have access to a single cent starting now." "Good. What about the condo?" David asked. "Change the locks today. Hire a professional moving company. Have their belongings packed meticulously and put into storage. They can pay the storage fees when they figure out how to earn money. And the car, the high-end German SUV, have it repossessed immediately." David hesitated, the kindness in him warring with his duty. "Robert, this will leave them completely stranded in Europe, without funds. Are you sure you want to be this drastic? It's Chloe, your daughter." I looked at the picture of Elizabeth on my desk. Was this what she would want? My heart twisted with doubt. Was I acting out of vengeance or justice? Then I remembered the coldness of their message, the disrespect they showed to her memory. "This isn't vengeance. It was a necessary intervention." "She made her choice, David," I said, channeling the strength Elizabeth possessed. "Sometimes you have to let them fall to teach them how to stand. They have treated my generosity as a right, not a privilege. It's time for a lesson in reality." I paused. The suspicion I had felt for months crystallized into certainty, and frankly, Given their behavior regarding my competency, I suspect there is more going on here. Much more. I want a full forensic audit of the trust accounts. Every transaction Mark has overseen. David nodded slowly, understanding the implication. Justice must be served. I'll get the forensic accountants on it immediately. We spent the next hour finalizing the details. By the time David left, the wheels were in motion. The financial umbilical cord had been severed. Now we waited for the reaction. Over the next few days, I settled into a new routine. I read, I gardened, I volunteered at the shelter where I had delivered the Thanksgiving feast. It felt good to be around people who appreciated a hot meal and a kind word. I felt a sense of peace. The house was quiet, free from tension. My phone started ringing on Saturday afternoon. I was sitting in the conservatory, repotting an orchid. Chloe's name flashed on the screen. I watched it ring. The sound was jarring in the quiet room. I didn't move. I let it go to voicemail. A few hours later, Mark called. I ignored that too. The voicemails started piling up. I finally listened to the first one. Chloe's voice was high-pitched, indignant, the tone of someone used to having their problems solved immediately. Dad, what is going on? She demanded. My card was declined at DR. It was humiliating. Mark is furious.
Your bank needs to fix this immediately. Call me back, DR.
The entitlement was breathtaking. Hearing her voice triggered the old parental instinct. To soothe, to fix the problem. I almost called her back, ready to apologize for the mix-up. My hand reached for the phone. No, that weakness was what got me here. I realized that instinct, that desire to shield her from discomfort, was exactly what had enabled this behavior. I had to remain steadfast. The silence was my answer. I deleted the voicemail. The second voicemail was confused. The third, angry. The fourth voicemail was furious. The background noise suggested a busy restaurant. Robert, this isn't funny, Mark snarled. We are at Lysank. They won't take any of our cards. Fix this now, or I swear to God. His smooth mask was slipping. Lysank, one of the most expensive restaurants in the world. The audacity was almost impressive. They were uncomfortable. Good. But the real storm was still brewing, and I had no idea how dark it was about to get. While I was finding peace, David and the forensic accountants were digging deep. David called me 3 days later, his voice tight with urgency. Robert, you need to come down to my office, David said. We need to talk in person. It's bad. And we have a lead on Mark's activities. I drove downtown. I found David waiting in his conference room, stacks of documents piled high on the mahogany table. His face was grim. Sitting next to him was a young man I didn't recognize. He looked nervous, fidgeting with his tie. He couldn't have been older than 25. Robert, this is Liam, David introduced. He's a junior associate at Mark's firm. He reached out to me anonymously after hearing rumors. Liam looked at me, his eyes wide with fear. Judge, I know what Mark's been doing. I saw the ledgers. He's been moving money around, hiding losses. It's a mess, a total disaster. What kind of mess? I asked, my voice calm. Judicial. The audit revealed significant irregularities. David began, sliding a thick binder toward me. Mark hasn't just been managing the investments, Robert. He's been stealing, skimming from the trust. My blood ran cold. I expected greed. I had not expected outright theft. How much? My voice was barely a whisper. He started small, David explained, disguising the withdrawals as fees, but it escalated rapidly over the past 18 months. He's diverted nearly $500,000. $500,000. The betrayal was deeper. Uglier. I opened the binder, transaction logs, forged authorizations, a complex money trail leading to offshore accounts. It was meticulous. It was criminal. Staring at the evidence, a cold fury washed over me. My first instinct was to call the police, have Mark arrested immediately. But that would create a public scandal, dragging my family name and Chloe's life through the mud. I needed the full picture before I delivered the final sentence. There's more, David continued, his voice grim. Mark isn't just greedy. He's desperate. Liam chimed in, his voice trembling. His investment firm is a house of cards, Judge. It's a Ponzi scheme. He lost a massive amount of client money in risky investments. He's been using your money to cover the losses, to pay off the most threatening clients. But that wasn't the worst part. The real betrayal was still waiting in the shadows. The accountant found wire transfers to offshore accounts linked to high-stakes gambling sites, David said, looking physically ill. He has significant debts, with some very dangerous people. Liam nodded vigorously. I overheard him on the phone, arguing with someone named Vinny. Mark sounded terrified. Vinny threatened to break his legs if he didn't pay up by the end of the month. Vinny, a loan shark. The pieces clicked into place. The pressure to sign over the trust. The urgency. They weren't just impatient to inherit. They needed the money now, to keep Mark out of prison, and perhaps to keep him alive. They were planning to use the trust as their personal bailout, I said. The realization hit me like a physical blow. It gets worse, Robert, David said, his voice barely a whisper. This is why they were so insistent about you being forgetful. This is why they kept calling you old man. He paused, hesitant to deliver the final blow. I braced myself. Tell me, David. We found documents drafted by Mark's lawyer, David said, his voice shaking with anger. They weren't just suggesting you needed help, Robert. They were in the final stages of preparation. He slid another file across the table. It felt cold to the touch. They were preparing to file a petition for conservatorship. They were going to have you declared legally incompetent. Incompetent, the word hit me harder than the theft. They were going to strip me of my rights, my dignity, my autonomy. The man who had upheld the law for 40 years, who had judged the competency of others, was about to be deemed unfit by a gambler and a thief. It was a legal assassination. They had a doctor lined up, David continued, his anger rising. A man named Dr. Evans. We looked him up. His license is currently under review for ethics violations. He was willing to testify that you were showing signs of early dementia. Dr. Evans. I knew the name. A man known for his flexible ethics and expensive fees. I had actually met him once at a charity event. Shook his hand. A slimy character. They were gathering evidence, David said, spitting out the word. Missed appointments, forgetting names. They were building a case against you, Robert. They were going to steal my life, not just my money. And Chloe? I asked, dreading the answer. My heart ached for the daughter I thought I knew. Was she a victim or the architect of my destruction? Was she aware of this? David sighed heavily. The silence stretched. In that silence, I knew the answer. He slid a single sheet of paper across the table. A sworn affidavit. She signed it, Robert, David whispered. She was fully complicit. I looked at my daughter's signature. Clear, steady, condemning. My daughter, my sweet girl. She hadn't just betrayed me. She had conspired against me. But David wasn't finished. He had one final piece of evidence. The final nail in the coffin. The moving company packing the condo found something, David said. Her personal journal. He opened the journal to a marked page. She was the one documenting your supposed lapses in memory. She wrote about how frustrating it was that you were clinging to control. David read her words aloud, his voice shaking with disgust. How much easier things will be once the conservatorship is finalized and we can fix Mark's little cash flow problem. A cash flow problem. That's how she described her husband's crimes, her father's destruction. The betrayal was staggering. A dark abyss. It wasn't just thoughtlessness, it was calculated deceit. The cruelty of the Thanksgiving text was not random. It was a celebration of their impending victory. They thought they had already won. The pain was immense. It threatened to shatter my resolve. How could I have raised such a person? I felt a profound sense of failure as a father. For a moment I considered giving up, letting them have the money, just to make the pain stop. But that would be a betrayal of Elizabeth's legacy, and my own principles of justice. I had to see this through, no matter how much it hurt. If this story proves that actions always have consequences, hit like and subscribe. We need your help to share these lessons. Thank you, David. Thank you, Liam, I said, my voice strained but firm. The last vestiges of doubt evaporated. Compile all the evidence, I instructed. The theft, the fraud, the conservatorship papers, the journal. We are going to need it. I also asked David to ensure Liam was protected, and to send an anonymous tip to the FBI regarding Mark's Ponzi scheme. The net was closing. I left David's office, walked through the busy city streets. The world felt surreal. I was surrounded by people living their lives, unaware of the dark abyss that had opened up in mine a week past since Thanksgiving. I was sitting in my study, reading a book on constitutional law. My personal phone started ringing incessantly. I checked the log. 10, 20, 30 missed calls. Finally, it stopped. The screen read 37 missed calls. The voicemails were desperate now. The latest one from Chloe was frantic, her voice trembling. "Dad, please. We're stranded," she pleaded. "We have no money. Mark is terrified. He says people are looking for him. Dangerous people. Vinny's men. We need help. Please, Daddy, help us." I'm scared. They were scared. Reality had hit them hard. The cold, unforgiving reality of a world where actions have consequences. Her use of Daddy. It was a calculated move, a desperate attempt to manipulate my emotions. Knowing Mark was in danger complicated things. If I didn't help, Mark might face physical harm. Chloe would be caught in the crossfire. Was I willing to let them face the full, potentially violent consequences of their actions? I wrestled with the choice. Justice demanded I let them fall. Ruzi whispered that she was still my daughter. I decided mercy was required, but it would be mercy strictly on my terms. I called David, booked them 2 economy tickets home. No business class. The cheapest available flight. Have a car service pick them up at the airport and bring them directly to my house. It was time we talked. It was time for the final confrontation. 2 days later, I heard a frantic pounding on my front door. I looked out the window. Chloe and Mark. They looked exhausted, disheveled, furious. Their expensive coats were wrinkled, their faces pale and strained. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a raw, desperate fear. I walked slowly to the door and opened it. "What the hell did you do?" Chloe screamed. She pushed past me into the foyer. Her face was red, her eyes wild with fear and rage. She looked completely unhinged. Mark followed her, his usual smooth demeanor shattered. He looked cornered, dangerous.
"You think you can cut us off?"
Mark snarled, his voice dripping with venom. "You senile old fool. You owe us. That money is ours. You have to fix this." "I owe you nothing," I said calmly, closing the door. My voice was low, but it carried the weight of authority. The judge was back on the bench. "And you will lower your voices in my house. You stranded us in Paris." Chloe shrieked. "We were thrown out of our hotel. Our condo locks are changed. Our lives are ruined." She turned desperate, pleading. "And Mark? He's in trouble, Dad. Real trouble. Vinny's people. You have to help us. You chose to go to Paris," I reminded her, my voice even, cold. "You chose to abandon me on Thanksgiving. You chose to call me an old man whose traditions were suffocating. You made your choices. These are the consequences." Mark stepped forward, aggressive, threatening. "It was just a joke," Mark snapped, pacing the foyer like a caged animal. "You overreacted. You're clearly unstable." He jabbed a finger at me. "Now, transfer the money back. I need it now. I have debts that need to be paid immediately." He was demanding, entitled, even now. It was staggering. "Debts from gambling?" I asked, my eyes fixed on him. Mark froze. "Debts from your Ponzi scheme. Debts to Vinny." The color drained from his face. He looked like a cornered rat, his eyes darting towards the door. "What?" Chloe asked, looking nervously between me and Mark. "What is he talking about, Mark?" "Ponzi scheme? Vinny?" I walked into the study. They followed me, drawn by the gravity of the situation. I picked up the thick binders David had prepared, laid them open on the desk. Bank statements, transaction records, evidence of the diverted funds, Liam's testimony, the gambling records, the evidence of their betrayal, laid bare, undeniable. "Your husband is a thief, Chloe," I said, my voice cold as ice. He stole $500,000 from the family trust. I let the words hang in the air. He has been stealing from his clients. His investment firm is a fraud. He is a criminal. Chloe stared at the documents, her mouth open in shock. She turned to Mark, realization dawning in her eye. The shock of his betrayal momentarily eclipsed her anger at me. "Is this true, Mark?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "Tell me it's not true. You said the investments were doing well. You said we were rich. You promised me everything." Mark didn't answer. He just glared at me, his eyes full of hatred. The mask had slipped, revealing the ugliness beneath. "And that's not all," I continued. I pulled out the conservatorship documents. The petition to Timmy declared incompetent. He also planned to have me declared legally incompetent, I said, my voice rising in controlled anger, to seize control of the entire estate before his crimes were uncovered, with the help of a crooked doctor named Dr. Evans. I handed the papers to Chloe. She saw her own signature on the affidavit, the proof of her complicity. "You knew," I said, the accusation hanging heavy in the air. "You were part fit. You were documenting my lapses in memory. You were going to strip me of my rights, my dignity." I pulled out the journal, opened it to the page David had marked. I read her words aloud, my own daughter's words. "Dad is clinging to control. He's so stubborn. Once the conservatorship is finalized, we can finally access the principal and fix Mark's little cash flow problem. The old man won't even notice." Chloe started crying, deep, racking sobs. "No, Dad, I didn't understand," she pleaded. "He told me it was just to protect you. He said it was for your own good. He said we needed the money to protect the family." She was lying, still protecting him, still choosing him over me. "I didn't know about the stealing, I swear. Don't lie to me, Chloe," I thundered, my voice echoing the quiet room. The rage I had suppressed finally broke through. "I spent my life discerning truth from lies. I see the guilt in your eyes. You were willing to destroy my legacy, to betray my trust, to essentially end my life. All for this man, all for money." I pointed to the picture of Elizabeth. "You betrayed your mother's memory." Chloe fell onto the sofa, burying her face in her hands. A broken woman, Mark remained defiant, though his hands were trembling. "So what if we did?" Mark sneered. "A last desperate bluff. You have more money than you need. You were just hoarding it. We deserve it. We have a life to live." He spat the words at me. "I earned it by putting up with you. You deserve nothing," I said, my voice dripping with contempt. "You are a parasite. You attached yourself to my daughter, poisoned her mind, and tried to steal everything I worked for." Mark lunged forward, his face twisted in rage. "We'll fight this. We'll sue you. We will win the conservatorship case. You are clearly unstable." "You can try," I said calmly, "but I have evidence of your embezzlement, your fraud, your conspiracy to commit elder abuse. I have testimony from your associate, Liam. I delivered the final blow, the one I knew would break him. Your Ponzi scheme is already being reported to the authorities. The FBI is investigating. They likely have a warrant for your arrest as we speak." Mark's bravado crumbled. He knew I was right. He knew the law. He knew he was finished. The room was silent, except for Chloe's choked sobs. The showdown was over. The verdict delivered. "Here is what is going to happen," I said, my voice firm and final. "Mark, you will sign the divorce papers that David has prepared. You will relinquish all claims to the family assets." I slid the papers across the desk. "The $500,000 you stole will be considered your settlement. Use it to pay Vinny or your legal fees. I don't care, but you will leave this family and never contact Chloe or me again. This is the only mercy I will show you." Mark glared at me, his jaw tight, but he knew he had no leverage. He walked over to the desk, took the pen, signed the papers with a shaking hand. He didn't look at Chloe. He stormed out without another word, a coward to the end. I turned to Chloe. She looked up at me, her eyes pleading, swollen from crying. "Dad, please," she whispered. "Don't leave me alone. I made a mistake. I was so stupid. I love you." "You didn't make a mistake, Chloe," I said. My voice softer now, but still firm. You made a choice. A series of choices over several years. You chose him over me. You betrayed me in the deepest way possible. I looked at her, this stranger who used to be my daughter. Love is not what you did. I'm sorry, she whispered. I was wrong. I was weak. Sorry is not enough, I said. Trust is earned, and you have broken mine completely. I walked over to the desk, picked up another document. I have restructured the family trust, I explained. David is now the sole trustee. The bulk of the estate will go to charity upon my death. To the Elizabeth Foundation. You will no longer have direct access to the funds. Her eyes widened in shock, the reality of her situation finally hitting her. The condo is being sold. The car is gone. You will receive a modest monthly allowance, enough to cover your basic needs. Rent for a small apartment. Groceries. I paused, letting the term sink in. It is contingent on you getting intensive therapy and finding a real job. You will learn to support yourself. Chloe stared at me.
Shocked. A job? An allowance? Dad, I'm your daughter.
You're my daughter, I agreed, and as your father, it is my responsibility to teach you the value of hard work, integrity, and respect. Privileges are revoked. It's time for you to grow up. I handed her the document. The allowance starts next month. You are on your own until then. Goodbye, Chloe, I said. She walked out, her shoulders slumped in defeat, leaving me alone in the study. My heart was broken, but my resolve was firm. The following months were difficult. Mark was arrested at the airport trying to flee the country. He was indicted on multiple counts of fraud and embezzlement. The news was publicized, a humiliating ordeal for the family name. He took a plea deal and went to prison. Vinny, the loan shark, was also arrested in a separate investigation. Chloe struggled. She called me often, sometimes crying, sometimes angry, complaining about her job search, her small, drab apartment, her limited budget. She was forced to navigate a world she had always been shielded from. There were days when her misery was almost too much to bear. She called me once, sobbing. Her electricity had been shut off due to a missed payment. Every fiber of my being screamed to rescue her, to send her the money, to make her pain stop. My hand trembled as I held the phone. It would be so easy. But I knew that if I rescued her from the small crises, she would never learn to handle the big ones. I told her to go to the electric company, arrange a payment plan. It was the hardest thing I ever had to do. I listened patiently, offered advice, but I never gave her extra money. I never bent the rules. It was tough love, the hardest kind, but slowly, agonizingly slowly, she started to change. She found a job as a receptionist at a non-profit organization, the same shelter where I volunteered. She started therapy, confronting the greed and entitlement that had almost destroyed her life. She began to understand the consequences of her actions. She began to take responsibility. I ran into Mrs. Petrov one afternoon. I was tending her garden. The roses were in bloom. Judge Robert, she said, smiling warmly. The hungry dogs are gone. The house is quiet again. Yes, Mrs. Petrov, I replied. It is. And your daughter? She asked, her eyes kind, knowing. She is learning, I said, a small smile touching my lips. She is growing. A year passed. Thanksgiving arrived again. I didn't cook a big feast this time. I didn't set the grand table. Instead, I hosted a small dinner for David and a few friends from the shelter. The atmosphere was warm, relaxed, full of genuine affection. We laughed. We shared stories. We celebrated the blessings of friendship and companionship. The house was filled with music again, a different kind of music. But music nonetheless. Late in the evening, the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone else. I opened the door. It was Chloe. She was alone. She looked different. Her hair was simpler, her clothes modest. She looked tired, but her eyes were clear. She held a slightly lopsided homemade pumpkin pie in her hands. Dad, she said softly, her voice hesitant. Can I come in? I looked at her for a long moment. I saw the sincerity in her eyes. I saw the remorse. I saw a glimpse of the daughter I used to know, the one Elizabeth had raised. The door is open, Chloe, I said, stepping aside. She walked in, looking around the room. She smiled faintly at the guests. A genuine smile, free of artifice. "I made a pie," she said, holding it out to me. "It's not as good as Mom's, but I tried. I wanted to bring something. I wanted to contribute. It's the least I could do." I took the pie from her. It was still warm from the oven. "Thank you, Chloe. That's very thoughtful." We stood in silence for a moment, the weight of the past year hanging between us. The silence wasn't empty this time. It was full of unspoken words, regrets, and a fragile hope. "I'm sorry, Dad," she whispered, tears welling up in her eyes, spinning down her cheeks. "Not just for last year, for everything. For the greed, for the betrayal, for the conservatorship. I was lost. I was so foolish. I understand now what I almost destroyed." She looked at me, her expression raw and vulnerable. "I missed you so much, and I know I didn't deserve to." She reached out and touched my arm. "Thank you. Thank you for not giving up on me. Thank you for saving me from myself." The tears I had held back for a year finally broke through. I pulled her into a hug. She clung to me, sobbing quietly against my shoulder, the smell of pumpkin pie mixing with the scent of her hair. "I know, sweetheart," I said, my voice thick with emotion, holding my daughter for the first time in years. "I know we still had a long way to go. The trust had to be rebuilt, brick by painful brick. It would take years, but it was a start." As we sat down to eat the pie, I looked at the picture of Elizabeth on the mantelpiece. I felt her presence in the room, a warm glow in my chest. I had protected her legacy. I had upheld justice, and I had taught our daughter the lessons she needed to learn, even if it meant breaking both our hearts to do it. I realized then that true family isn't just about shared blood or easy comfort. It's about respect, loyalty, and the hard work of love. I was an old man, yes, but I was also a father and a judge, and I had finally found my way home.
Thanks for listening. Please rate our story in the comments. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe. Your support means a lot because your time matters.